Hello. Today I'm going to take you through the process of creating a Node.js instance and adding it to existing HTML project. We'll cover some Git stuff and some Node stuff and just using the IDE. First thing you're going to want to do is clone the project. So I'll go to the project here in Sentry, clone, grab our URL, take it to your terminal. Oop. And if you can paste properly. Perfect. And then in order to clone something, you need to git clone. And now we'll be able to open it up in our editor. Now we have the project open here in Webstorm, and we also have a terminal over here. And we can go cd sentry to get into the directory. Okay, the first thing we want to do is just set up a node project as do npm init. This will take you through everything. Sentry is good, version 1 is good, description, carbon simulation. And then we want the entry point. I'm going to name it app or server.js. Just that makes a little bit more sense than index.js because index.js is generally for our HTML page. Test command, we're not going to worry about testing it. And that's our Git repository. Keywords, don't need any author. Here, ng, license. Unlicensed means that we're not licensing anyone to use the project. We're not giving you a license and hold all the rights. Yeah, except for they wanted it in all caps. And is this okay? Yep. Yes. So now we'll see we have a package JSON, and if we look at that in the editor here, package JSON, this is where you can put scripts that'll run. You can also install dependencies, and they'll happen here. The main script we're going to want to add is like a start script. So let's start, and the script will be node server .js. That should be good enough for starting. This will actually change a little bit because I think we're going to have to restructure this project a little bit. Make all the HTML client-side stuff in like one area, and then so we can have private server code. Because the thing is, we don't want to expose this whole folder to the server with the index and stuff in here. We want to put that in a subfolder and expose that. So what I'm going to do that quickly-ish is just generate a new project with Webstorm. And usually go with Express, and then Stylus and EJS. So EJS is embedded JavaScript, and Stylus is kind of cool because you can use just regular CSS with it. And it also adds a few other features, and it just goes right in as middleware into your Node projects. So then I'll generate this. Let's just call it Century. Oh, let's spell it right. U-R-E. And this is going to generate in another folder. I'm not actually going to use that folder. I'm just going to copy the contents into this existing repository. So let's create that, and we'll create it in a new way. So then we have the Sentry project here. And what I can then do is I'm just going to copy everything from here. And move it into here. And it should merge pretty nicely. Let's see if it works. package.json already exists. Yes, let's overwrite the package.json. And Webstorm's being kind of smart. So I should see there's a bunch of other folders in here now. And it's still just doing the move. I'll bring you guys back when the move's over. Okay, so now it's asking us if we want to add the file surrogate. And yeah, we do. We're also going to need to add all of these other files, but I'll go through them in a little bit more detail in a second. One thing we'll note is this package.json is now changed and has start node bin, and in the bin folder we have this www script. This is like the binary or entry point that we're going to run with PM2 on the server later. But we don't really have to worry about what's happening in here too much. All it's really doing is starting our app. Here at server is HTTP server create app. And then if we look in the app.js, this is where the actual Node.js Express server is set up. And if we look through from the top, it's including some libraries. Setting up our routers. Routers are used to like take the logic of your like API outside of this main file, so you can split things up a little bit. And our app is an Express app. And we're setting up our middleware. And then we're setting up the routers. We're telling the app to use them. And then finally at the end, we're making the errors if and this has to be last. Okay, but as far as we're concerned, what's important is that we're using the public folder as a static, express static in the public folder. That means that this is basically like a normal Apache web server or something like that. So what we can then do is move our assets into the public folder. I just clicked and dragged them here. I'm going to do that refactor too. Hopefully that didn't actually break our code trying to be smart. Public assets, it did. Control Z. So you can undo refactors here. I'm actually going to want to move it into that same folder, but instead I'm going to not search for references so that it just does a dumb move, which is what I want. And I'm going to do the same thing with the index.js. I'm going to move that into public, or index.html, or refactor. And we don't need this login PHP probably. And readme.md, paperclip. Okay, so all this is project stuff. There's the app, and our public has the same JavaScript that we had before. We also have the stylus and JavaScript folders for our browser-side JavaScript. We can use the project structure that we already had though. So now I'm just going to go through and make sure everything that needs to be included is included. We can do git add through the editor, or a little bit of a faster way is to, I was going to do git add star, but I'm just going to check out our git ignore before we do that. So we don't actually have one, so I'm going to create a folder or a new file. Git ignore, and it has to be a hidden file, so .git ignore. Add, and let's add /node modules. Let's also add .ide and .env if anyone uses an env file in here. We can also, I think that's pretty much everything we need to exclude for now. So these are just files that it's not going to include when we do git add star. So I'll save that, and then we can go to our terminal here and do git add star. So yeah, it's ignoring node modules, that's fine. Perfect. and then I'm going to commit it. So you can use the little check mark button in the editor up here, or do Control K. And you can see all the files that's adding to repository. So it's moving all our stuff. And commit. Ooh, I need to specify a message. So convert to Node. Commit. And it will take a second to do this code analysis. So there's a bunch of warnings, but we don't care. Let's just commit anyway. And so now you see how all the files changed color. That means that this is the current Git version. And then if we edit a file, something like index.html, I suppose. So if we add a comment here, you see how it changes to blue. That means there's changes in that file. It's kind of handy to know. So now we're gonna want to deploy this on the server. But maybe before we deploy it, we can test it locally. To test it locally, you just go to the package.json, run the script. Sure, let's run it and start. Port 3000 already in use. So this is just because I have another project running. I'm going to add a script to kind of deal with this. 3000. But we can just run this command and it'll kill all instances running on that port, on Linux at least. So now if we start the server, it says it started, doesn't give us very many logs, but if we go to localhost on plan map, we can see that the website's being served here locally on port 3000, like we said. One last thing I'm actually going to do before we deploy it is change this port, the default one at least, just to something that's not 3000, because 3000 is default for all Node apps kind of thing. So in order to do that, let's change it here. Let's make it 4248. Why not? 4248, gotta remember that. And then we do have to change that in www from 3000 to 4248. Okay, so let's do one final commit with that. Control K. Update port. Commit, and then I'm going to push this. Oh, and I do not want to push it to master. So I kind of made a mistake at the beginning here by staying on the master branch when I was committing. But that's kind of okay. I'm not going to push my master branch to the origin. I'm going to keep it on my local machine until the issue is resolved. But what I will do is create a new branch off of master, call it here, create. Oh, why did I make it caps? It's okay. So I just updated it to lowercase. So what we're going to do is push this here branch only to the origin and not master. So it doesn't conflict with anyone else's changes when they're trying to merge. So I'll do Control-Shift-K. And so this is pushing here to origin here. So that's exactly what I want to do. So I'll do push. And then let's go over to the server and try and deploy it. So I'm going to split this horizontally so we have two windows. And ooh, kill the little cat. Anyway, here let's go SSH horse 3 ls. So there's this carbon folder, and I'm just going to look around. So we're going to need to do a few things. The first one is going to be get the code onto the server. So let's see if the key's already set up for this. So let's go to the project, clone, git clone dot VPS. Fatal, could not read from a repository. Okay, so that's because our SSH key isn't set up. So let's cat .ssh. So we don't have any key currently. So let's make one using SSH keygen. Yes. And we can cat this key. Oh, they must have changed where so they've changed where the key gets put. That's weird. Anyway, so you can copy this public key. So it's in settings, repository, and then we want deploy keys. So if we paste the key in here, and let's call this here horse 1, and we don't need to grant write permission. So accept, add key. Sorry, I made a mistake when I created the SSH key. So let's just move. And we need to move it to and now work properly. Sorry about that. Let's install Node. First thing I go sudo su dash. Ooh. And now I'm just copying and pasting commands from the plan map. Install page. It's basically the same, but I'll pause the video during most of the wait times. Or actually, you can probably watch it happen. It doesn't take that long. So this is installing Node.js. And then we're using npm to install pm2. Perfect. We're also going to install the grunt CLI. This isn't necessarily needed, but that's the preferred method for doing bundling. Grunt's pretty useful. And then lastly, we gotta set it up so PM2 runs on startup. And one thing to note is we have to run PM2 save to actually save the process list that we want to restart. So now, if we Control D to exit being root, we should have PM2 installed, and we can run our PM2 start Sentry. Okay, so that worked. It did crappy spelling, at least. But, so now we have it running, and if we were able to go to that port, we should see it. But we can't see it right away. What we have to do is tell Apache to proxy something to it. So that's going to involve setting up the DNS as well as Apache. First, I'm going to go to DigitalOcean and let's set up that. So it looks like Vera has already set up the domain, and this points to the Horse3 server, I assume. So let's look at the Apache configuration to see what we have to change in there. I'm just going to also PM2 delete www. I think that's what it does. And I guess it's saying that our code has an error, but let's not worry about that now. Let's fix that in a second. So cd /etc apache2 sites available, and we can see we have the Sentry LESSL config. So let's edit that. Nano Sentry. So this is telling it that we want to use that sentry.planmap.ca HTML folder. But what we actually want to do is use the Node instance localhost on that port for most of the stuff. So I'm going to copy some code in here. Okay, and I do have to be root to do this. So what we're going to do is use the Apache proxy feature to proxy everything to our new port, which is 4248. That's the one we set up by default earlier. And so now, this is never used or called. And let's save that. And then sudo service apache 2 reload, and it didn't error, so we must have the proxy already set up, or like the proxy module installed. Okay, so now if we go back to our home folder, cd Sentry, and what we want to do is check on that error. So let's go PM2 logs, and it's saying module blah blah blah, module not found, app.js require. So I'm gonna guess that we haven't installed our dependencies yet. So normally this is done in the deploy script, but we can go npm install, and this should go through and install everything we need from npm. And then if we do pm2 restart, I'm just going to use the ID, which I think is 1. I'll later change the name here. And now I see it says it's online, but do pm2 status. We see it didn't error anymore. And so now, if we go to Sentry.planmap.ca, it still works, but this is now working off of Node.js, I believe. So if we do pm2 logs, we can see that we access the server here, and when I go to the browser. I'm going to just make it small so you can see both at the same time. I refresh. We're actually using this Node.js server here instead of Apache to serve these files. And that's about it. One way we can test this is by going to /something random, and we see we're getting an error in app.js. So that's about everything. I hope this was useful, and if you have any questions, let me know.